hello, everybody. My name is Matthew Bohm, CEO and co-founder of RevOps Co-op. We are a global community of 11,000 plus folks who are all passionate about revenue operations. And we do a lot of different things for our members, from Slack group to a newsletter to digital events like these, and courses, education, lots of different things. But the topic of the day today is all about kind of sales efficiency, sales capacity, and kind of how RevOps can master those things, along with a bunch of other items. And we've got a couple of panelists who have a lot of experience and a lot of domain kind of subject matter expertise in these areas. And so really happy to kind of have them on today to be able to kind of drop some knowledge and kind of share their different approaches and things to this topic. So to get started, we've got Werner Schmidt, who is the CEO and co-founder of Lative. And Lative is actually a software solution that does a lot of great things in this kind of sales capacity, sales efficiency space. But Werner, let me ask you first, quick, anything you want to add to either kind of professional introduction or anything on Lative as well? And then I always ask panelists on our digital events to tell us one interesting non-work, non-professional related thing that has nothing to do with Lative, nothing to do with your incredible background in this kind of space. So drop an interesting kind of personal fact on us as well.
Right. Well, Matt, thanks. And thanks for having us on. Great to be here and get to talk about, performance, efficiency and capacity. So I've been, very similar position to you, Matt, RevOps for a long time, for 20 plus years before it was even called RevOps, even sales ops, to show my age a bit. But and it's been quite a journey for all of us as RevOps, as we try to figure out how to do things and do things better and drive sales organizations to be high growth and efficient now. And so and I just I'm just thinking now, Matt, and I'm just going straight to probably a fun fact before we go on to Vern. Just thinking, well, Rugby World Cup's on. I'm not the tallest guy in the world, but I used to play rugby when I was younger. But just so it's great to see. I think actually the US will be hosting the World Cup in a bit as well, in 2 times, which will be good fun to come over and watch rugby in the US. So I just a fun fact on that. I used to play rugby. There was small schoolboy rugby, and I got into the college to go see if I'd go join the rugby team. But I looked at the size of the guys, and actually on sign up day, I walked back out the room and thought, look, I value my life a bit more. So I think that was one of the smart decisions I made in my life.
You probably have much straighter nose because of it. And
that's true. My ears are still the same. And funny enough, I actually used to play prop. And then they moved me to 8th man. I'm 5'10" is not exactly the 6 foot you need, or at least to be an 8th man. But it was good fun. Really enjoyed it. Had a lot of fun. But it's great now to be watching the World Cup in Paris. Over the next few weeks.
That's awesome. All right, I'm going to make sure that Ross and Shannon and other people on your team know that the next team building exercise that y'all have is going to be kind of rugby practice, Lative edition. So no, that's great. All right, well, thanks. Thanks for kind of the context there, Werner. And next up, we've got Vern Bubb, who is an LP at Stage 2 Capital and also an ex-MD at Clary out of Europe. So tons of kind of experience in this space. But Vern, I'll turn it over to you. Anything to add on the kind of professional introduction there? And then, like Werner did, give us one interesting, kind of personal fact, non-work related, non-professional related, and maybe non-rugby related, unless you got, unless I don't know, maybe professionally. That would be
professionally, the only other thing that's related to this is I was at LinkedIn, selling LinkedIn Sales Navigator for 5 years. So I was the first leader for LinkedIn Sales Navigator in Europe. So that's also in this kind of sales tools and technology space. Interesting. I actually am doing on Saturday night a 50-mile hill race. So that'll be through the night. So hopefully I'll survive that. But if I could have two, my pet subject or my side gig is self-storage, which is slightly different.
Hey, that's great. So I mean, I guess just another version of a subscription-based business, right?
Exactly. There's a
Yep,
lot of correlation.
yep. Just the physical variety. That's
The
awesome.
physical side of it. That's exactly right. Yeah.
That's awesome. All right, so from rugby to self-storage in the UK, we've got kind of a panel of experts, and I am going to drop the link for. We did actually Lative is a formal partner of RevOps Co-op, so we do have a demo link that I'll drop in there that anyone who's interested in kind of this topic of sales efficiency, sales capacity, and wants to look at how to automate it, you can kind of watch the demo, read the write-up. But again, this isn't a product session today. We're going to be showing all of the kind of expertise and kind of knowledge that Werner and Vern have in this subject. So Werner, I'll turn it over to you because I know we've got some visuals that you wanted to share and kind of start walking us through just how to think about sales capacity, sales efficiency on the RevOps side, and even like why is it important? What is it? How do we do it? And then how can we actually like improve it? Like what are some things we can do to move the needle? And I know we're going to cover all of that over the next 45 to 50 minutes. So I'll turn it over to you to pull up your slides, share your screen, and kind of start walking us through that.
Right, now we'll do that, and as I pull them up here, because it is, and it's the timing of it too. So, we really, what Vernon and myself are going to run you through is just, some things to really think about it as you get into Q4 planning really for a lot of companies that have got their fiscals beginning of next year, calendar, or do even starting in February. So just as we think about performance, what's the best ways to measure performance? So as we think about efficiency, how do we do the calculations for efficiency, and then how do we use that data to really think about capacity planning and really think about how we can produce revenue efficient capacity plans for next year or years after that. So with that, let me pull up the deck and just make sure. Can everyone see? Can you see my screen?
Yeah, perfect. Looking good.
Okay, great. Okay, good. So just, our agenda, as mentioned, we're going to run through sales performance and just building that foundation. What the basic calculations look like, and then what the more advanced would look like, depending on the resource and ability within the teams. The sales efficiency, as I mentioned, how do you get more miles out of the engine? But how do we really start to think about efficiency, right? We've had this growth at all costs for good 2 decades now, and now it's really about efficiency and profit. So how do you build the teams, but thinking about that efficiency component far more frequently than we have been in the past. As mentioned, using those two then to get into your capacity plans, and then bringing it all together, right? Because ultimately what we're trying to drive is high performance sales teams and being revenue efficient. So with that, I'll hand over to Vern.
All right. So why are we here today? You've all joined because of sales productivity. So that's important. That's what we look at. And Werner's clearly the expert of that. So in one slide, just setting the scene, Forrester Research did this document. It was about 2 years ago that said for sales operations going into the future, sales productivity was absolutely at the heart of it. But the problem is that people struggle to define exactly what sales productivity is, which we're going to look at in more detail. And so there people used to default to other measures that we'll also talk about. And to me, it's kind of inevitable. It was inevitable that LinkedIn Sales Navigator would be successful. It was inevitable that Clary would be a tool that would help people consistently forecast. And to me, it's inevitable that in the future in sales operation, there will have to be a platform of some sort that measures sales productivity, pulling disparate information together into one place so that people can see in real time, are they getting a return on their investment? Werner.
Right, thanks, Vern. So starting off with sales performance. It's a big topic. I mean, we've got sales organization, you need to measure that performance. So, measuring sales performance, we break into a few pieces, right? So it's like understanding what is true sales performance is really, it's critical to then set and hitting and exceeding sales targets. And why? Because we've got to know how we're performing. Are we above attainment, or are we below, or what areas do we need to optimize in, or increase headcounts and so forth. But also what's really important is you need to understand who's doing well and who's not doing well. And so that's why we really need to we need to measure this accurately, but also benchmark. And not just benchmark externally, it's benchmark internally, that you've got a consistency on how you're able to measure your teams within your organizations from one geo to another, or one product line to another, and so forth, again, depending on the size of the organization. So, really doing this in the right way it's just core to the foundation of building a revenue efficient sales organization. And we're going to talk more about it. But just a question, out there, to the group is really, how are you measuring sales performance today? As we think about, is it quota attainment and how you're measuring it, or is it productivity? So as we dig down a bit more into this, and this is, just over time, started to learn that when we start to use quota attainment to measure performance, there's a lot of variables, as we all know, that goes into actually setting the quotas. And one of the areas I always struggled with, I was back at Websense, actually Citrix is a good example of this, where we had a number of salespeople in each of the geos. We had set the quotas at the start of the year. And well, actually before the start of the year, because we need to get the quotas out at the start of the year. And we'd notice that, we'd bring out the quotas, and then you'd always get the email, and us RevOps, leaders in the RevOps teams would get that email and saying, right, you need to adjust quotas in one of the regions. Why? Well, it's just an agreement we made, and we've got to do it for whatever reason. And now suddenly you now had consistency on how those quotas were set across your regions, but now you've got one region that's operating on a different quota setup, because the tweaks being made, and therefore it's very difficult to benchmark the teams. And as we know, that's just at the start, and that's the first change you get. By the year, halfway through the year, you've probably had about 30 changes to quotas, for whatever reasons they are, the many that come through. So trying to use quota attainment to measure sales performance is at a high level, fine. It can maybe give you some good indications of where you're heading. But when you start to look at that performance in a more granular view of what we need to be doing, or by a dimension, which we mean by a new business or renewal business by a region, that's always that gets really difficult to be able to do that. So why is it a mistake? Sorry, 1 second. Why is it a mistake? So only 45, well, as we know, 48.5% of salespeople are actually hitting their quotas. This is scary, because this has just been dropping. I know the last couple of years have been difficult, but this has been going down and down over time. It was about 58% about 6-7 years ago. So if we know that, then how are we using performance to measure, or we're using quotas to measure performance? So something for us to really think about. Quota methodologies, as I've spoken about, are dependent. They're very dependent from organization to organization. Even within organizations, the methodologies can be different depending on how those businesses are set up. And as pointed out, right, if you've got 30 changes by the middle of the year in your quotas, it's just inconsistent and unstable. So if we think about measuring sales productivity, and what Vern was talking about right at the start, where that great research from Forrester was Serious Decisions, is how much revenue does a salesperson produce per unit of time? So the yield per rep per unit of time. So if we do that, okay, this creates now a stable foundational metric for us to then measure performance, because now we've got a baseline that we can use. Also, there's no changes to this, right? A salesperson is going to generate revenue. When you look at that across a team, then you've got an average productivity that gets generated across that team. When you look at it across a geo or region or product line, you now get an average of what the productivity is per person. So that's why you get the stable foundational metric. And then, of course, the more salespeople you have, the more it's an average. So therefore, it gets harder to move, and if something fundamentally changes in the business. It can be applied across teams, territories, product lines, as I've just mentioned. Also, what's important about productivity when you measure it this way and define it this way, it can be trended. It can be trended over time. So super important for us in RevOps and certainly enablement teams, because what you want your productivity to be flat or going up. You don't want it to be trending down. honestly, 9 times out of 10, when we see productivity trending down, it's trending down because we're hiring salespeople and we're hiring more salespeople. That starts dropping productivity. Okay, and then also importantly, it identifies opportunities and risks. Where's my productivity coming from, or where's it not coming from? Okay, so simple formula for you out there. If you're not calculating productivity today, really the best way to do this is you're going to look at your closed won business. So what's the revenue achieved during a period of time? You want to look at it over a period, be it a month, or if it's high velocity, you might even look at it per week. But if it's more, mid-market to enterprise, you could say, well, not a month, let's look at it over a quarter, or look at it over half the year, or even over the year. And then you're looking at how many salespeople did you have during that period? So you're taking your closed won business, you're taking that over how many salespeople you have, and you're getting a number. So now I can see on average in August 2023, each salesperson generated $20,000. Okay, great. Now, if you want to get the more advanced formula, and this is where we need to get more granular, because now I've got a baseline, I've got my productivity. Now you want to start looking at real-time revenue achieved during a period of time, but by dimension. So now I want to start looking at things like against North America or the small business segment and so forth. But also when you get to salespeople, it's the number of salespeople that are able to sell during that period. It's not the number of heads that you've got on board, because you need to know how many people can actually sell in that period or in that segment or in that dimension. So as you can see, this complexity grows. And on top of that, as we know, we've got a lot of people you've got attrition. So you've got people coming in and out, you've got people that you hire, and you've got people that are leaving, some people that may go on maternity leave, some people that are on holidays. This all needs to be factored in. So as you can imagine, as the complexity just grows. So now when I'm looking at it in this example here, where I've got business closed in August in North America, it's $172,000, more $624. Divided by, I've actually got 5.8 salespeople that are able to sell in August in North America. That's because you've got to take this down to FTE level as well. And that actually means the productivity for that team in North America was actually 29,762. So you can see the difference from where we were in the simple formula. Well, the average is just 20,000, and this is what we see a number of organizations doing. But actually, when you look at it, the sales productivity for that team in North America was actually just under $30,000. Quite a difference. So this is why it's super important. But from our point of view, it really gives you this baseline. Our advice is for all of you to please start calculating this if you aren't. Because really what you're going to get out of this is you got a benchmark to start seeing what your team's producing at, and you can take it across dimensions. You identify those areas of outperformance versus underperformance. You can see who's performing and who's not, because you've got your top, middle, and your bottom when you start to stack rank. You can measure the impact of training and enablement programs, super important, right? Or systems and tools that you've rolled out. If you've rolled something out and you know what your productivity was before that initiative, then start measuring it month by month or whatever the frequency you're able to then see what the impact is. And generally, you want to see your productivity going up. Back to Vernon's earlier point, sales productivity, the metric should be the center, and everything that we do should be improving productivity rather than having it go down. If it's going down, stop doing any of those initiatives that are causing it to drop. Also helps with understanding the impact of hiring and organizational changes, and then really assess your ramp times. Ramp times is absolutely critical, and we're going to talk about that in a bit.
And question, Werner, on if you want to go, can you go back? I guess just two slides where you have the details, maybe. So yes, and actually, had a question from the audience as well in terms of kind of how do you define able to sell? And then you did talk a little bit about like fluctuations with the headcount, and actually maybe this is where most of the questions come, because like when I was looking at this, I was like, okay, so if I want to calculate this for my team today, right, I can go to Salesforce, HubSpot, pull some report that shows how much business did I close over a period of time, right? That's my that's my numerator. And then if you got like the denominator of your like the number of salespeople that's able to sell during a period of time. So here this is over a month, right? It says for the month of August. So I guess two questions. Is this like just the average of how many were at the start versus how many were at the end, right? And just average that, and that's what gets you to the 5.8. That's question number one. And then question number two is how do you define, able to sell? Is that just like fully ramped? So it's kind of organizational specific, or is there some other definition or consideration there?
Yeah, no, great, man. Great two questions, right? And this is why this is so complex, and this is why a lot of organizations just really struggle, right? I back at Citrix days, right? We had 2 analysts full time just trying to calculate this data, because there's just so much movement that happens, and so starting off with your the bookings we can get to, we know that, okay, that's fine. So, but when we go able to sell, so those salespeople that are able to sell. Generally, yes, you can divide it by ramped or ramping, and that's another dimension to say, actually, I want to see my fully ramped salespeople that I know that have been there for the full, month of August. Or I might want to say, okay, well, I'll just look at my ramping team, who are the individuals that were just ramping for August. So you could look at them either combined. Our suggestion is you look at them separately. You look at your ramped productivity versus your ramping productivity. So that's another element to this. And being able to sell is when you've got your fully ramped, that's fine. But you also know that there's certain individuals, you might have someone in that team that actually might be on holidays for those 2 weeks. So this is when you get to FTE. So really that person that's on holiday for those 2 weeks out of the 4.5 weeks of the month, probably says FTE should only be 0.6, because 0.4 of the time that person's not there. And this is where you start to get to this denominator starts to change. So when you're tracking it, assuming you've got a spreadsheet that you'll be doing this in, you'd have to be factoring this all in to be able to get to the correct number. And that's why this is so important, because when you're looking at productivity to figure out what is my actual productivity of the team and what should it be, or what are we aiming to, because ultimately a target turns into productivity. If you've got a target to hit, that's productivity. You've got a productivity target, and you should be able to measure on how you're doing to that across these dimensions.
Yeah, makes sense.
Okay, great. So with that, I'll hand over to Vernon.
So yeah, just so briefly, I think everybody on the call knows that the salespeople are not spending a lot of time selling, as in here from Salesforce, only 28% of the week. So all of you will have projects of which to increase the efficiency and effectiveness of your team, whether that's hiring in the right areas, enablement programs like rolling out a challenger sales model, or technology where you're implementing LinkedIn Sales Navigator or Clario, whatever the case may be. But as what we've shown, it's not easy to work out if actually that is creating an improvement or not in the productivity, unless you're doing the calculations as Vernon suggested. So back to Werner now for the most interesting part, which is efficiency, which is, am I getting a return on the money I'm putting into my sales team?
And Vernon, this reminds me of a conversation we had, it was a while back now, and I'll never forget it. When I spoke to Vernon, we were kind of just thinking about later, and when we think about productivity, because it's just been years and years of just doing the productivity calculations, and I got asked by a very well-known product leader, Chris Battles, when I was at Citrix, and he said to me, "Great, I love this productivity across my product line, but how efficient was that? How did I get there, and so on? How's that product actually performing?" And when Vernon and myself were talking, and Vernon, said to me, "Well, just think about efficiency even more broadly. You start to think about actually sales contribution." And that was always a question I certainly used to get from a couple of CEOs. Well, what is the sales team actually contributing to the organization? And that's always been a very hard question to answer. So let's first define what we mean by sales efficiency, right? So how much revenue are you generating versus what you spent? That's fundamentally what it is. So why is it important? Well, actually, that builds on the productivity of what we've got, but it actually gives you return on investment, and the inverse cost efficiency. What's it doing? It's demonstrating capital efficiency to the stakeholders, and really drives that overall strategy for higher operating margins. So if you want to increase your sales operating margins, you need to be looking at your sales efficiency. And now we've come from 2 decades of growth at all costs where we didn't have to look at this. It wasn't often that we knew the budgets were generally would sometimes, we would have to look at it, but generally it was an overall number. Finance would be controlling how much headcount you were given. Again, it depends the size of your organization that you're operating in, but there wasn't a lot of responsibility on that. That's all changed. Now we do have this efficiency, and we should do, because yes, we should be responsible for hitting the numbers, but also we need to be thinking about doing that efficiently. Because ultimately that improves, you improve operating margin, you start improving company valuation. So just another question there, I'd love to know from the audience, how are you currently measuring your, basically, are you currently measuring your return on investment? And if you are, how often are you looking at it?
Yeah.
So, yeah, so man.
No, I was just gonna say I put my answer in there, even though I'm pretty sure you're just gonna tell me all the reasons why I'm wrong, Werner, because that's what you did on the first slide of telling me why quota attainment is not the right way to look at this. And now I just told you that the way I've always looked at efficiency is, okay, if I'm paying someone X and their quota is Y, what's my, is that 2X, 3X, 4X, 5X? And I guess maybe, I don't know, maybe I'll cue you up now. You can tell me all the reasons why that's wrong, or why there's maybe some better ways.
Yeah, well, man, you have some good news that is the first way that you do need to look at it. Absolutely. So what you want to look at is at a high level. Definitely. So I think definitely at a high level, right? I want to look at that again, the revenue always got generated by the cost. The only pieces we'd add to that, you've got to take it more, you've got to be far more granular than that, right? So you've got to get to a specific period of time that you're looking at, and the cost needs to be for the revenue generated, and the cost needs to be appropriated for that period that you're looking at as well. So again, the accuracy of these calculations are important. But so in this example, right, business closed in August 23, we use that same example in North America. So that 172,624. But now it's the selling costs for those salespeople. But important, Matt, in addition to what you're saying, is that we're able to sell in August for 2023 in North America. And then you get your ROI, right? I get in a 2x return for that investment. Now, generally, we always, been told over the years, you should be at 3 to 5x. That all depends on the business you're in, where you are at what stage, and the strategies that you're implementing. But this is a very important indication of when to start hiring people or when not to hire people. Because if you've got a return on investment that you need to be at 3x and you're operating at 2x, I wouldn't go ahead and hire a bunch of salespeople, because all that's going to do is not going to drop only your productivity, because that's the first indicator. It's going to start dropping your ROI. And we see that a lot, right? You see that this productivity dropping. That's the first indicator. You then go look at the headcount. What happened? Headcount was going up, and then what happens? You go look at the efficiency, and you see your ROI dropping. And when ROI is dropping, it's not easy to fix it. It takes a couple of quarters before you can turn that around. So very important to look at this. But then also added to that, that's fine. Now I'll give a metric. What we also suggest is do the inverse. Just flip the calculation around. Because what you want to look at is, what is my cost efficiency? So what is my efficiency of what I'm doing for the team? So in that same example, this means I've got a 48% cost efficiency. So the higher this is, the worse it is. You want it, the lower it is, you want to be. So if you want a 3x, it's going to be 33%. But this is one way that if you start to model this, you can create nice graphs that then show you, what your revenues generated and what your cost efficiency is. And then you can really, like a bubble chart, you can start to stack rank the teams or the product lines or the regions, however you want to look at it from a dimensional standpoint. But super important to be looking at this on top of the productivity.
Yeah. So go back to that slide quick, Werner. So because there are some questions on from the audience on kind of same thing, this term, we talk about selling costs, right? So obviously there's salary compensation for salespeople. Should we also be including and considering software costs, call it just like non-salary related costs in the sales efficiency calculation?
Yeah, and I think that's up to each organization to decide how they want to do it. Generally, you're right, Matt. You're going to have your base salary and variable. Those are the two generally you look at a sales organization, sometimes bonus. But we also, a lot of the time will be actually, let's add some burden costs that are going to come, because we know there's a 10% burden or 15% burden that needs to be added for additional taxes or or sometimes IT costs that are appropriate, or office costs and so forth. Our suggestion is, variable, their base salary, of course, their variable if there's a bonus component, and then I'd add a percentage for a burden. And just assume a 10 or 15%. Generally, you can ask finance and say, look, what's the average burden rate that you're assigning as a percentage? And we would use that. You can add more, but then it just adds more complexity and more people to ask to try and get to those different data points.
Yeah, makes sense. I think, yeah, you want to include total costs, right? Which, means kind of salary and salary related costs. And then I think your advice there is good in terms of, start with start with something that's least complex as possible, because again, like the more complexity you add, the more things there are for people to either like poke at, ask questions about, things that you can kind of argue on, where, like you said, if you go to finance and say, hey, non-salary related costs for things like technology, Salesforce, anything else, shared services, whatever it might be, what's that number? That at least gives you a good starting point, and then from there you can get more granular, because like you said, maybe you've got a giant expensive tech stack for your sales team that actually means they're above average when it comes to the average kind of burden rate, or maybe it's the other direction, right? Maybe it's maybe it's less than that, but find somewhere to start with, right? That makes sense. Make sure you're including all of those selling related costs, and fine tune from there.
Yeah, exactly. And on the variable, I mean, if you're looking forward, right, we also want to look at this forward sometimes. You can use OTE, and because you can assume that everyone will hit their OTE, or you could take a percentage of that OTE. But you're right, it's important. And there's two. You could look at it one way, just variable cost, true direct cost of just the pure variable with base salary, and then you can add the burden cost of the IT cost on top of that, and it'll be quite interesting to look at the differential on that as well. Okay, good. So again, just highlighting what we're just talking about, really, the benchmarking, is really, it's important. So it's relative profitability, which I know Vern loves and is very passionate about, and really identifying those high and low profit areas. But importantly, this helps you with your investment decisions. Where am I going to invest my next dollar into the organization? If I know my productivity and I know my return on investment or cost efficiency, it helps with those decisions. It speeds up the decision-making process on where we're going to invest. And if you're doing these calculations on a regular basis, when you make that decision, you can see what the impact is. And if it's the wrong decision, you can course correct. So this is why we ask, it's the frequency at which you run these calculations, which is important. If you only run these once a year, it's going to, sometimes, you make decisions throughout the year, weekly almost. And you're not going to then see the impact, or you're not going to understand which decision impacted productivity or your return on investment. So important to get the frequency right. That then helps with those investment decisions. And then, of course, importantly, right, measure the impact of the change of compensation plans, which we all, love, and we need to, because it drives behaviors with the compensation plans. But you can see the impacts and what that means, and you can pull the levers and adjust that, which then also impacts profitability. So from a compensation point of view, we can imagine, I don't have the latest data, but in the future, CROs and sales leaders are not just going to have sales quota targets, but we'll have sales efficiency or sales contribution quotas to support. Looking in the chat, people are talking about Gong, and if sales wants Gong, then they've got to pay for Gong. We had at Clary, I had a customer, they wanted Clary, and then the CEO said, well, if you want it, your kind of contribution quota, your contribution target has to say the same. So either your targets go up or you make savings elsewhere. And to me, that type of conversation would be a best-in-class conversation. As Vernon was saying, it's about deciding where to put your money. Strategy is the allocation of resources to the area of best return. And that's no different from sales teams, as we see this example here from Casper. When he was at Peakon, they spent a lot of time selling into SMB, but when they looked at the sales contribution from all the sales teams, they actually dropped SMB and focused on mid-market and enterprise. And having this kind of data analysis helps make those decisions. Great. So on to sales capacity, because, you know, what are we trying to do, especially at this time of year, is figure out what is the capacity and the sales organization need to look like, in the next year to ensure we hit our numbers. That's what you do. I always had this, simplified way to figure out what the quotas should be for the sales organization. And it would be, well, what's the finance number we given? How many salespeople do I have? Divide one by the other, and that's what the quotas need to be. Obviously, there's a lot goes behind it, but fundamentally, that's what you need to do to hit your numbers. Ignoring any overassignment that happens. But where the struggle was, well, how many salespeople do we need to hire in addition to help ensure that we hit those numbers, and when do we hire them? And I'm sure we all, on this call have got all our models that we've used over the years to help actually figure this out. And what's really important is we need to get much better predicting what's the sales team's ability today, and what it'll be able to deliver in the future. And then what if we add additional headcounts or take out a headcount, what the impact does that then have on the plan for the year? So why is it important? Well, fundamentally, we need to know, if you're not going to calculate your sales productivity and know what the teams are producing at, well, then it is virtually impossible to actually produce an accurate capacity plan. And what we said at the start, right, what Vernon and myself are saying, if you look at quotas and you're trying to use quotas, we know there's so many variables to the quotas. So if I'm taking quota attainment and saying, well, if I hit 90% of my quota, then that's how I'll predict the capacity. Well, that's a pretty broad stroke brush, and just saying, well, look, is that really what's happening in the small business team in the UK? Or is that what's happening in the enterprise team that's in Australia? Probably not. You need to actually go look at it for far more granular points and take those data points to then use to then feed the capacity plan to get it accurate. So again, back to those earlier points on why you need to have the foundation of your productivity data to then feed your capacity plan. And then, of course, also looking at your return on investment data. What does this also do? It enables tactical and strategic planning. So you can look at your initiatives of what initiatives are we going to do next year. I know when I was at WebSense, I always got told, look, the productivity's got to go up by 10% next year. And that's bottom line. So every year you need to increase by 10%. With no additional funding. And it's interesting when you look at that and say, well, where am I going to put that 10%? Well, I'm going to get a lift from some enablement that we do. And I'm going to get a lift because we're rolling out an engagement platform, or we're rolling out a forecasting solution, right? But it was very hard. It was you just look at it and go, okay, well, 2% here, 2% here, 3% here, and so forth. Those times have changed, right? We need to be far more tactical and aligned to the strategic plans and the initiatives that are going to drive that. So really use the bottoms up data to be very clear on where we're going to see those lifts. And then once you've done that, you then need to measure against it. So a good, another question for the audience is, what are you using today to build your sales capacity plans? Would love to know. We're assuming probably mainly in spreadsheets, or do you have a technology in place that's helping you, that's been homegrown to really get to helping you predict and build your sales organization for future years. So the main factors influencing sales capacity, right? So this is a great graph from Gartner. They've done a nice paper on this also in 2020 of how to accurately build a sales capacity plan. So, as we were talking about in that productivity calculation, weighted headcount. So, but there's more pieces to it, right? So yes, you can get the fundamental productivity calculation, but we got to look at things like ramp times. If I'm going to add 2 or 3 sales heads next year, or sometimes, I've been in organizations where we're adding 40, 50 sales heads in a year. You've got to look at how long does it take to actually hire to ramp a salesperson. Is it 3 months? Is it 6 months? And even if you've got 3 months or 6 months, what we need to know, is it 90 days or is it 85 days? Because every day matters. So it's really important to understand that. And of course, super valuable information for the enablement teams. Look at attrition. What's my attrition? And what am I expecting? Because that needs to be factored in. So now I've got my headcount. Average productivity, we've spoken about. But you've got outside factors that also factor that productivity when you start to think about marketing, what's coming from the marketing demand gen engine or outbound or so forth, or the product decisions that might be made, product features or development cycles that are releasing, or even an acquisition might happen, right? And you've got a new product line you can sell, so that could help increase productivity. But you can see that there's a lot of pieces, but that all needs to be factored in, because those are the two foundational pieces that then feed and help you then build a very revenue efficient capacity plan.
Yeah.
So
and the one thing you mentioned there, Werner, which I was just like, I don't know, sometimes I'll, you sit back and hear those things of, like you said, oh, if you can, improve ramp time for a new salesperson from say 90 to 85 days. Or how, like a difference of 5 days can make a big difference. My first reaction was like, nah, it's only 5 days. But then I was like, well, if you, let's say you hire just five people over the course of a year, that's 25 days, right? That's a whole nother month of selling that you could have accomplished with, like you said, just the difference between 85 and 90 days. And now, like you said, you get to some big organizations where, like you've been at the past, where you hire 40 or 50 people over the course of a year. Again, 50 times 4, that's 200 extra days of selling. So those, like you said, those days do matter. They're not, they're substantial. They can mean a lot. So yeah, that stuff adds up, right?
No, absolutely. I mean, I think, more recently, before we started later, when I was at Sage, big organization, right? 2,500 sellers plus. You've got a lot of salespeople coming and going. And when you're looking at enablements and you're looking at those enablement programs and how you're going to onboard, when you're in high velocity segments, you want to make sure that onboarding is, you're going to get someone from the day, from day 0, preferably, in this case, day 60, or maybe even day 90, to be at average productivity of everyone else. And that is really hard to do. And why it's so important is we invest so much time, or companies, well, all our companies do, right, in hiring and finding the right people. Just think about the recruitment that needs to go into it, and the cost in doing that, and getting that right person, get them on board, all the enablement that needs to happen. I remember the programs at Sage that we used to roll out, I mean, they were extensive, the teams behind it to deliver the content, to do all that, the systems, the tools. Very important. And so why do we just say, well, ramp times of like 33 months? To your point, like it's not. We need to know daily what the ramp times are, just given the investment that's been put into this. And that's why, it's super important. And once you get it right and you start ramping people consistently, it's within certain timeframes, and you get that accuracy, then everything starts to fall more in place into the capacity of what you need. And what happens when you get your capacity plans right? You hit your numbers. Because how many organizations, I'm sure we've been in, or teams, companies have been in where we just missed the number by Q2, we missed Q2, and then it's really catch up. And why? Because attrition was higher, or something was happened, or when we factored in the headcount, we didn't factor the ramp times because the finance didn't, for whatever reason. There's just all these reasons on why it might happen. So really important point, Matt, and thanks for pointing that out, because it is a very critical piece to build an accurate capacity plans. Okay, so yeah, I mean, to summarize really what we were just saying there, I mean, AIDS investment, hiring, and coverage model, when to hire, and also the conversations that you can have sooner on. If you build this out and you've got this all the data, preferably real time, right? You can have much richer conversations with finance, saying, look, if we back end load the plan, we're not going to get to the number. If you let me hire those heads a bit earlier on in the year, now you can see what the impact will be, and therefore we can get to our number. So you can have much richer conversations and actually come to a much better place than scrambling at the end or just before the year kicks off to agree when you're going to hire those heads. So what does it also help you do? You can predict potential divergences from the plan, because it's great, all well and good to build the plan. Okay, now I've got the plan, great, but how did we execute against the plan? What actually happened? Because a lot of the time we do our plan and it's sort of, other things happen, priorities come flying through the door, and what you got to focus on, and you don't go back and look at that plan. But then that's one of the mistakes we make too. We should be looking at the plan daily, if you can. How did I do? What was what happened in August? What happened in September? But what do I need to adjust? What do we need to shift? And really, sets those realistic guardrails for how we think about quotas. What quotas should we be setting? If we know what our productivity is and we know what the capacity is, well, then what should the quotas look like? So you start to have, you know, an idea, and you have the numbers now to start thinking about the not just the quota setting, but how those quotas should roll out over the year. What should the mix of business look like over the year as well, as you know, you can trend it over time. And then, of course, importantly, it helps validate the sales forecast. I mean, if anyone knows this better, it's Vern. So you know, you need to be able to, you know, if we've got a sales forecast and we're trusting from what's been rolled up. Okay, great. Well, what is my capacity actually telling me of what we can do? And generally, you're going to land somewhere in the middle. So, and I know Vern likes to talk about that a bit more than I did.
Yeah, well, I think you're conscious of time. The result of working in an area like this, where there's lots of spreadsheets, having recruited, I just got in the last 2 jobs, 85 people, is a bit like swimming in treacle. Because different views, different opinions, and different spreadsheets. And then for the sales leaders, it's just hard to piece it all together. And it says here 85% of leaders struggle to get the budget they need for headcount. Or in my opinion, it's hard to struggle to not get the budget, because people want to give you more people, but you don't want to take as many people all the time. But the net result is it's a bit like swimming in treacle without clarity. Werner, you got 5 minutes or less.
Yes, no, all good. So just bringing it all together, you know, and this is, you know, we all do this because a lot of it's all done in spreadsheets, you know, manual data extractions here on other systems, you know, building custom development spreadsheets and models. We've been doing that for, you know, 20 plus years. What's the, you know, I think we all know the limitation and gaps on it, just the sheer resource to be able to do it. But it's important, right? If you're not doing this, you need to be doing it, especially in the times we're in, and just making your sales organizations, you know, more efficient. But of course, you know, the issues with spreadsheets is, you know, snapshots. It's only at a certain time. It's inaccurate, and it is slow, especially when you've got large data sets that you're pulling in from multiple sources. Of course, the headcount's always a challenge, as we've already discussed. But even doing some of those productivity calculations. So really, what you want to get to is real time, because once you've got the real time connection to CRMs, you've got the opportunities closing, you're seeing everything in real time. You can start to apply. You can use the technology to really, you know, have advanced algorithms to automatically calculate this all for you. And what is those benefits, right? It's I'm seeing things in real time. I'm seeing trends. I can start to really start improving my decision making. It's just to think how much time you save on how fast you can start to make decisions instead of having to wait for all the data. And then it just provides the foundation for advanced performance and analysis. You can see the impact of the investment decisions in real time. You can actually see, if I make a decision today, what happened tomorrow, what happened next week, what happened in a month, and course correct if it's not the outcomes that you expected. And what's really important is we know the world's moving fast, things move fast, decisions happen quickly, and so everything's changing quickly. So we need to be able to adapt and manage that change, and especially for large, complex organizations. So you can imagine everything we've covered off now. Imagine when you've got 400 or 500 people, or even 250 salespeople. This stuff gets really, really hard, and requires a lot of people. So, you know, we have a customer story from EDB. I love this, from Nadini. Just you know, a big organization in the US, you know, 1,500 customers, 90 plus salespeople, but she had, you know, she lives and dies by productivity, right? What's happening to my productivity? Is it going up? Is it going down? Where's it going up? Where's it going down? And had, similar to myself in my past, where we had 2 analysts running all this data. But what are the outcomes that EDB are seeing, really? And where you've got someone that's now implemented the technology to be able to do it instead of manually, is you've got improved decision-making time. You can see the real-time visibility, but interestingly enough, of where there are gaps in the current data that you're analyzing, and what needs, how can you enhance the data so that you can get more accurate numbers than leading off inaccurate numbers. And what Nadine also says, right, just the ability to produce accurate capacity plans on when to hire or when to optimize, super important. So with that, you know, coming back to Vernon, as we think about that shift to strategic sales, you know, really revenue efficiency and planning.
Sales productivity is the heart of everything that will be happening in the future in sales operations. So, yes, Matt, any questions? What do you want to do next? Do people?
Well, I think so. Yeah, I mean, I think obviously, you know, super timely with everything happening in the market and all the talk around, again, kind of efficiency, doing more with less. But I think, we called out some of those examples before, right? Of how something like improving ramp time by 5 days for every new rep that you bring on board, how when you add that stuff up can make a huge difference. And I think that very much aligns with the charter of RevOps is, what are the things that we're doing today that we can do better, right? That don't require us investing necessarily like more dollars or more people to produce more results, but just doing things better, more efficiently, more effectively to produce better results. And I think Vitor had one other question in here that I don't think we really hit on, which is what's the, I guess, kind of the interplay between things like sales capacity and sales forecast, given that they both, kind of hit on kind of revenue expectations, but are obviously different calculations and look at things differently. So, Werner, maybe for you, how have you seen those things kind of play off of each other, play with each other? Are they the same? Are they different? How should we think about those?
Yeah, no, I mean, I think for me they're different, right? You need starting with let's think about it from your capacity, right? You got a sales organization that's in place today. That sales team is able to deliver a certain amount of capacity, and we've run through on how to figure that out, how to calculate that. But when you're looking at, well, what's the forecast of what I've got to do? What can that sales team actually generate from a forecast standpoint? Well, I need to be able to see that as well. So ideally, what you want to see is you see your forecast of what for the month, for the quarter, or maybe it's we're looking a bit further down, or maybe 2 quarters, and then what capacity do I have? And so what's that helps me validate is that forecast makes sense, because if I'm going to get a forecast of call it 1 million, but my sales team's capacity is 500,000. I'm probably, just thinking, actually, that gap's probably just too big to think that I'm going to hit 1 million by the end of the quarter. So that capacity starts to help you. So that's why they're different, but they're very much, they're very important to be looking together. I'd love Vern's thoughts on that as well.
Oh, sorry, I was reading the questions there I was reading the questions from Rohan. What was the question, Werner?
So just looking at the capacity number versus the forecast number.
Yeah, 2 fundamentally different things for different reasons. Forecast absolutely driven, bottoms up, deal inspection, triangulated exactly what you said with capacity today. And then capacity planning is more kind of medium long term, with the forecast being this quarter or this month.
Yeah. And then I guess on Rohan's question of, as you look at things like productivity and think about companies that may be selling into the enterprise, have longer sales cycles, if we're talking over the course of, again, 6 to 9 months, what are some best practices that RevOps teams can look at on how they can improve efficiency, output, productivity in an environment like that, where deals do take 6 to 9 months to close?
And that's mid-market to enterprise, right? So I think it's the efficiency. It's as long as you calculate and you know what it is, right? If you do nothing, your efficiency or your costs are staying the same, and you're assuming your productivity is going to go up. So therefore, your efficiency should improve. It's when you start to hire people, the efficiency, if you don't have the productivity, it starts to drop, right? But there might be strategic reasons why you're doing that. You might be going into a region to do it, or so forth, or there might be, again, it depends on what stage you are in within that organization. But again, it's over time, right? Even if it takes 6 to 9 months to close a deal, it doesn't matter, because when you're looking at it over time, you need to train things. You need to train your ROI. You need to train your productivity. So some advice is, when you do these calculations, look at it to 2 to 3 years back. And you can get a good trend of what's happening over the months or over the quarters, generally quarters, because what you want is an upward trajectory of your productivity, and you would like to see your return on investment going up or being flat. If you start to see productivity trend down, because that's the first indicator, ROI is not going to be far behind that. And once ROI starts to drop, as I mentioned, even over a period of time, it's much harder to adjust it. So you want to be watching it, and of course, as those deals close 6 to 9 months out, you'd assume you'll be seeing your ROI increase.
Yeah, What about you, Vernon? Any feedback for Rohan on that in terms of things to do to help improve productivity, given the
Well,
environment?
I was thinking just at a micro level versus Vernon's macro level. Best practice to avoid kind of slippage enterprise level is, ironically, focus on ROI of the deal, of the thing you're selling. We're here talking about the ROI and efficiency of sales teams, but the number one way to avoid slippage is getting the sales teams to focus on the ROI to their end customers of what they're selling.
Yeah. Yep. Yeah. And I think, yeah, one of the other, good things, at least on that too, is, like urgency, right? Like, why is it important to realize that ROI now, right? Don't think necessarily in terms of like, quarters or when you're going to be able to close that deal by, but yeah, how can you kind of produce that urgency? And maybe on the RevOps side for folks in RevOps, right, is how can you enable your team to deliver those results, right? Do they have the materials they need? Are they trained up? Are there, again, call recordings, coaching sessions, all of those things that can help with that? Is there ramp time, or ramp materials, right? Training that you can build in. Those are all things that can, kind of help to impact, produce results there. Awesome. Well, I know we're kind of right at time. We've got like 1 or 2 minutes left. We'll give everyone here like one last chance to ask any questions. But otherwise, Werner, maybe I'll start with you. Any kind of closing remarks, last thoughts for folks that are still kind of hanging around on this whole, again, notion concept of sales capacity, efficiency, productivity?
Yeah, man, I think what's important, I mean, it's just, as you were talking there earlier, RevOps teams are always under pressure. I mean, it's not like we always have all this resource to be able to do things, and we always want to do more, but there's only certain things that we can focus on, right? And to your point, right, I think it's been very clear and focused, right? What are the 2-3 things that we can do that is really going to have an impact? And I know these calculations take some time, but if you're not doing them, really spend some time just doing it, even if it's high level. So it just gives you some indications that you can start to work towards. But also it will start to help deciding what do you want to focus on, what don't you want to focus on, because it's ultimately, as Vern said, right, sales productivity should be the center of what we do, and if we're not improving it, or at least maintaining it, then you got to question why are we doing those things. So again, and this can help with those data points. It can help you have those conversations with the C-suite saying, hey, you've asked us to do this, we're doing this, but look what's happening. So that's why it's important. I think longer term can absolutely help RevOps teams with those conversations. Yeah, I love that. I'd say challenge everybody here. If you're not doing it, figure out how you can go and in the next hour get something down on paper to, like you said, use as a starting point. Vern, what about you? Any last kind of closing remarks, closing thoughts for the crew here?
In the past, there was a correlation between revenue growth and the value of a company. That's no longer the case. There's now a greater correlation between the value of a company and sales efficiency. So it's inevitable to me that in the long term, there will be much more focus on the measurement and management of sales efficiency, because ultimately that's what drives the value of companies and what we should all be aligned to. Yeah. Yep. Agreed. And with that, we are at time. So Werner, Vern, thank you all for dropping a whole lot of knowledge on everything from sales capacity, efficiency, productivity, and everything in between. We had a former rugby player, a self-storage mogul from the UK, and some RevOps experts on the panel. I love it. And thank you to everyone who kind of attended, stuck around till now. Appreciate all the questions, engagements, and listening as well. So with that, I will let you all run. Have a good rest of your Tuesday, and I'll see you on the flip side. So take care.